All right, so we are in Ecclesiastes chapter 1. We're going to take a look starting in verse number 12 tonight. And so Ecclesiastes chapter 1 from verse number 12. And we're going to go all the way, Lord willing, I guess I better qualify that, Lord willing, into chapter 2 down to verse number 11. At least that's what the lesson is. And so Carl, Sharon, if you remember, we went through this a long time ago. It was back in, I think, 2012, 2013.
Wow.
But do you remember this?
I remember going through it, I couldn't tell you exactly.
Well, good, because if you could remember exactly what we did, then there would be no point in this, right? Then you wouldn't come back anymore, and then we'd be all upset. No, but one thing if you remember about the book of Ecclesiastes is that the phrase "under the sun," and what this is talking about is just kind of remember, what we looked at the last couple of weeks is that you've got to remember that the book of Ecclesiastes was looking at the point in time from somebody is born, the point in time when they die, and that's it. It's not saying that there is no eternal life. As a matter of fact, it does say that there is eternal life. But the focus of it is not anything after somebody meets their Maker. It is right in between the point when they live or born to the point that they die. That's it. And the main thing, and this is kind of what we talked about last week, is just simply this question. What is the gain? All right? That is from the point where somebody is born up until the point when they die, what is going to be the sum total of their lives? What is going to be the gain? And the answer that he is going to come to time and time again is this. Nothing. Okay? There is no gain. And because there is no gain, and because it's looking at this life, it is therefore something that is meaningless. All right? Or something that is empty, something that is void of force, void of purpose. It's something that is vain. And so, time and time again, we're going to look at through the book of Ecclesiastes as far as this is meaningless. Now, this isn't to say that life is meaningless and that there is no point and purpose to life. It is saying that this life right here, life under the sun, is meaningless and pointless. When we look at life outside of this, then we've got something to really talk about, okay? But that's not the focus about what all this is about. So we've looked at who Solomon was. We've looked at a little bit about what his opening thesis is. Tonight we're going to look at the first part of Prove It. And so last week he opened things up with the thesis of saying, what is the gain of life under the sun? Now he's going to come up and he's going to prove that there really isn't any kind of gain of life under the sun. Now, if you were going to prove that there's no gain of life under the sun, how would you do it? What would you go about? Would you go about using scientific method? Would you go about with a chemistry experiment? Would you poll people? How would you go about doing it? What's that?
I might, as he is doing, reflecting on my life
Okay.
under the sun.
That's exactly what he does, is he reflects back on his life. And so what we're going to see is that in the first couple of verses right here, we're going to be talking a little bit about how Solomon is the tester, okay? And so he goes and talks a little bit about that. And then the last part of chapter 1 is how Solomon can conduct this test, okay? And then we're going to look at chapter 2 about how he starts to get into this test and start to see the results of it. But before we get into this, I just want to bring your attention, draw your attention to that little box right there, Insights. Insights. Styles of writing. Ecclesiastes combines prose and poetry frequently. Many translations of the Bible distinguish these styles by showing in the prose and paragraph form in poetry in verse form. And so if you're looking at your Bible, it probably shows that verse 12 through verse number 14, see how it's in paragraph form? And so that's just prose. In other words, he's just talking or he's just writing. But then when you look at verse number 15, it's in verse form, and that is poetry, okay? And you look at it and you say, well, it doesn't really sound like poetry. Well, you got to remember, you're going from Hebrew to English, and so that's going to wipe out any kind of, sound simulation that's there. But in addition to that, Hebrew poetry is more about, I think of it as a rhyming of ideas more than it is a rhyming of words. I mean, there is that a little bit, but Hebrew poetry has a lot more to do with the rhyming of ideas. And so anyway, once we start to get into this more in the book of Ecclesiastes, kind of pay attention to those little different things. Because when you see that it's in paragraph form right there, think, oh yeah, this is him talking. And then when you see something there that's in verse form, then you can think, oh, this is something that he's kind of selectively putting there to kind of show a little bit of an emphasis or a little bit of a point, okay? And so as you go through that, I think it's kind of worthwhile to kind of look at it. Plus, once we start to get more into the book of Ecclesiastes, we're going to see that there's a lot of proverbs that are there. And proverbs are going to be poetic statements that are there, and some of them don't really have much to do with one another. They're just simply proverbs and wisdom all throughout it. But we'll get into that when we start to get into the other chapters. Okay, so taking a look at chapter 1, verse number 12 real quick. All right? So he says this. He says, I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. So a lot of commentators will say, oh, well, Solomon really didn't write this. Instead, it was a scribe, or, it was one of his court members or something like that. But I don't know, where it says, I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. That limits a whole lot of people, okay? As a matter of fact, that scratches off scribes and everything like that. And so, when somebody wants to go that route, I'd rather go the route of saying, well, this is what it says. And wouldn't it be better to just simply accept what it says than to try to conjecture what it doesn't say? But anyway. But notice he says in verse number, yes. Didn't wait very long.
I was going to say, I read somewhere that it was Martin Luther that actually first started saying that it wasn't Solomon who wrote Ecclesiastes.
Do we have any Martin Luther fans in here?
Well, he was
Okay,
anti-Semitic.
so there's a lot of things that Martin Luther was wrong about, including this.
Very anti-Semitic too. I mean, he hated the Jews.
Well, he hated other people too,
But anyway, this thing that I read said that it was a given that Solomon wrote this up until about the time of Martin Luther. Martin Luther was the very first one to come out and make it popular, the opinion that it wasn't Solomon. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But
I don't know, but it's pretty apparent. When we get on down, we're going to look at it a little bit more. But, okay, look at verse number 13. It says, I devoted myself to the study and to explore by wisdom all that is done in heaven. What a heavy burden God has laid on man. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. So again, he's looking at life here and now. And when you look at life here and now, this is what I'm saying, we can't look at Ecclesiastes. You need to look at it as far as, here is man or mankind, and we're in our own little orbit. We're in our own little circle right here. It's not saying that God doesn't exist. It's saying that God is in his own little orbit, in his little own circle over here. Okay? I mean, this is the focus. We're focused here. And then when God is trying to do something to get our focus, then what is the implication? Well, God's being mean to us. God is, he's this life that we have that God is, because he's a creator, he started, it is a hard life. And so you know, this is what he's saying here, is that what a heavy burden God's laid on men. And so he's seen all the things that are done on the sun. You know, this is Solomon, again, looking back on his life and looking back at what's going on. And he's saying, I've looked at all of this about life, and this is the conclusion I've come to, is that it's meaningless. It's just a chasing after the wind. How many of you guys like to go chase after the wind? It's just a very fun activity, isn't it? You know, you can, well, that's not chasing after the wind, that's using the wind. But has anybody chased after the wind and caught it?
You know, where it comes from, you know, where it goes.
Yeah.
There.
Has anybody chased after the wind and gotten anything other than exercise?
When I was a kid in Chicago, because it's pretty windy up there, and I was just a little guy, and it was wintertime, kind of spring. If you stood just right, because we were out kind of country, it would almost pick me up.
Yeah.
Well, in New Mexico, right. You know, we would get our jackets and,
Yeah.
you know, I can see that. But, you know,
At times.
but again, that's using the wind, just like the guy. I'm talking about, you know, chasing it. When it just, there's nothing there, right? It's just meaningless. Okay. So he says in verse number 15, what is twisted cannot be straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. And so that just kind of shows you, again, the meaninglessness of it, the utility of it. And so if you have something, you take a piece of metal and you twist it, it doesn't matter how much, you know, you're never going to get it exactly the way it was. Right? Paul, back me up on this. If you twist a piece of metal, you'll never get it exactly the way it was. Right? Okay. Well, then that's my point.
I know that works with a paper clip.
Huh?
A paper clip, you can't. put it back.
Yeah, you just won't get it. And if something is lacking, you're not going to be able to count it, right? You know, how many lemons are supposed to be in that jar? Okay, well, you can count the lemons that are there, but you know what's going to be there, you don't know. What's lacking, you can't count it. So then he goes on and says, I thought to myself, look, I have grown and increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. Again, there's Solomon, right there. You know, it can't be anybody other than Solomon. He's ruling in Jerusalem. God made Solomon wiser than anybody else on the earth except for Jesus Christ. And so if he says that he was wiser than anybody else ruling over Jerusalem, you know, that's it. You know, that's Solomon. And he says, I have experienced much of wisdom and of knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom into the madness of folly. But I learned that this too is a chasing after the wind. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. And so he took this wisdom of his and he decided, you know what, I'm really going to sit down and I'm going to examine and look at this life that I've lived, that I've seen, that I've experienced. And again, Solomon isn't just some, 21-year-old that's just now starting to, get into life and figure things out. I mean, he's somebody who has lived a lot. He's somebody who has done a lot. He is somebody who's had a lot. He's somebody who has ruled a lot. He's somebody who has a lot of wisdom. And so he's really taking it all in, and he's saying, okay, I'm going to really drill down and try to understand what's going on and try to figure the purpose of life out. Okay? All right, let's go and talk about questions. Okay? Question number 1. As a matter of fact, let's skip to the second question. Let's skip to this question right here. Who wants to read Genesis chapter 3, verses 16 through 19? Anybody want to take a stab at it? I know you got to get over it before you can volunteer.
16 to 19.
Yes, ma'am. Chapter 3.
He said, I will greatly increase your pains and childbearing. With pain you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. To Adam he said, because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and vessels for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return.
Okay, another very uplifting passage of scripture right there. Looking at that passage of scripture, kind of replacing the question a little bit, but does this explain why life is so hard now?
Yes.
Okay, in what way? This is after Adam and Eve sinned. And so God, first of all, cursed the serpent. God didn't curse Adam and Eve. God curses the serpent. God curses the ground. But He gives consequences to the woman, consequences to the man. So, what's the consequences to the woman? Verse number 16.
She will have pain at childbirth instead of death. And
Okay.
she will also be subjected to her husband.
Okay. So, the woman, pain, subjection. Okay, women, I have no experience of this.
You don't want
Clothes,
it.
clothes labor hard.
It can be difficult.
Okay.
Like that.
As far as generally speaking, you know, I do think that women have a hard time, you know, with, I mean, not just the labor part of it, but I mean, even just the child part of it, the child rearing part of it. You know, there's a lot of times us men were just like, okay, fine, whatever, if that's the way they want to be. I don't care. You know, women don't tend to take that approach. You know, and I'm not saying that that's it, you know, exactly, but I think just kind of generally speaking, you know, that there is a lot of pain in childbirth. And it's not to say that, you know, we men, we don't have our share of difficulties with the kids and everything like that, but, you know, I think that that's there. Now, as far as we men go, what is it there for us in verse number 17 and 18?
And sweat and work and sweat.
Painful toil. So guys, do you think that is pretty much the way life is? I mean, it is for women too, but, you know, if the ladies, especially if, you know, you look at this day, this particular time period, the women is going to be, you know, the responsibilities are going to be with the children. The men's responsibility is to go out, work in the fields, and try to provide for the family physically.
I'm sure it's not easy cutting up all that meat either.
What meat?
Well, if we had livestock, right?
Yeah, why are you killing your livestock?
To eat it.
They don't reproduce every day.
I know.
So in other words, you don't.
Oh, you're talking about every day, an everyday chore.
Yeah, I mean, you know, back in those days, people didn't eat a lot of meat because they didn't have a lot of meat.
A lot of
The
money.
reason why they didn't have a lot of meat is because it takes a lot to keep that livestock going, right? You know, and so you don't just go and kill one just because you're hungry. You know, man, I could sure use some chicken nuggets. Spare ribs, yeah, that sounds really good. It didn't work out that way. You know?
Didn't they have to trade stuff for goods too?
Yeah,
So like sheep wool, so they had to shave a sheep.
yeah. So if you go and you kill off your sheep for some
Lamb
lamb
chops.
chops, you won't have any wool.
I'm talking about just taking wool. Wool can be heavy, right?
Oh yeah, sure can. It's still, you gotta find somebody to trade with.
Yeah.
So my point is, life isn't easy. Then it's not easy now, all right? And the reason why it is that way comes back to this verse right here, these verses. Now, let's go back to the other question. Do you think that God always intended for life to be a burden? How did God intend life to be?
Garden of Eden.
Garden of Eden?
That's right. Absolutely.
Piece of head.
Peace of heaven.
Gain.
No pain in childbirth.
Sweat.
Just, hey, the trees just bear fruit for you.
Real physical activity.
You're hungry. Well, I'm sure they have physical activity.
No
But-
agony.
Oh, agony, yeah. You know, if you're hungry, just go pick you off something, but just stay away from that one tree that's in the middle of the garden.
Right.
That means,
Couldn't do it.
that was trouble. So,
But didn't God want man to work in the garden even before he fell? He put man in the garden to work. So
What
he
did
gave
he
us work and labor, but we were supposed to get fulfillment and joy from it.
yes.
Not thorns and dirty fingernails.
And there's the point right
I
there.
don't think they had any physical pain from the work.
No. And, you know, and I think that more importantly than that is that there's fulfillment in it. Okay? There's not a whole lot of fulfillment if you're just doing something repetitive over and over and over and over because you have to. Okay? How many of you find fulfillment in doing something repetitive over and over and over again because you have to? You know, usually when you're, you know, especially if you're working a job, you get fulfillment in something when you know what it is that you're doing, you have an enjoyment, even if it's hard, but you enjoy doing it, and there is a sense of accomplishment at the end, right? Okay. All right. Next question. All right, so Solomon, if you notice that he says, going back to the book of Ecclesiastes, in chapter 1, verse number 18, he says, "For which much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief." So the question is ignorance bliss? Do you think that people who are more aware about life are more prone to misery than people who aren't? Okay. What way?
It depends, if you use your knowledge to help other people and draw you closer to God, you'll find fulfillment. But if you're just doing it just for its own sake, you know, I think a big place that Solomon misses it, he never talks anywhere in here about doing anything for anybody else.
But why would you? Because we're talking about life under the sun. And if you're talking about life under the sun, you're talking about me, myself, and I.
You know.
You're talking about when I was born, what I'm going to do to get fulfillment before I die.
But I know people that aren't Christians that still are, they help other people.
Sure.
That's one of their goals in life, is to enrich the lives of other people, and they get a fulfillment from that.
Right. And that's not what we're talking about.
But that's what I was saying about Solomon.
Right.
Here he's supposed to be so smart, but he never even considers that.
Well, I think that that's one of the things that this book is considering, implied to consider, but maybe not necessarily helping people, but just simply that there's more to this life than that. But, you know, kind of getting back to the point, I think that sometimes when people understand life more, are probably more miserable about life when this is all they're looking at, right here.
Right.
Okay? You know, because the more that they see, the more that they don't know. The more that they see, the more that they don't like. The more that they see, the more that they're seeing more of those layers of pain and toil. Yes, sir?
The whole book is about his life. He used an example. He had more than everybody, more gold, more women, more everything. And that's what he's saying, it meant nothing.
Right,
Without God, it's nothing.
right.
like you said, a lot of people, and a lot of people Christians get jealous and some of the people seem like everything they do turns to gold, you know, and they're not Christians at all, you know. But, you know, where they're really happy or not, you don't know. Their life is not fulfilled without God. They're not going to be fulfilled.
But see, that's where, we come up with what Jesus said. Whosoever loses his life for my sake will save it. Whoever seeks to save his life will lose it. What does man gain? If he gains the whole world, but yet he loses his own soul. But that end, we're talking about under the sun. When we talk about under the sun, then all of a sudden a whole new world opens up. Okay, but talking about Solomon, his riches, or anything like that, let's use that as a segue to go into the next section, okay? I wanted to get through those first couple of ones because we talked about that a little bit. Anybody got any questions or anything before we move on?
No, but with his wisdom, you know he had to be one miserable person as he looked back
Yes.
under the sun. I'll tell you.
He is a miserable person. And, you see it in both Ecclesiastes. Okay? All right. So looking at this section right here, Solomon begins the test in chapter 2, verses 1 through 9. So in verses 1 through 9, Solomon gets on with the examination of life by testing it with pleasure. Okay? So in verse number 1, he says, I thought in my heart, and he's talking about taking all this wisdom and understanding that he has and applying it to figure this stuff out. So he says, I thought in my heart, come, I will now test you with pleasure to find out what is good. Now, we read this word pleasure, and I think that it's very easy for us to just automatically think sin. Okay? Because sinful pleasure. But we need to understand that pleasure is really something that is having to do with happiness brought on by outside situations and stimulations, okay?
Satisfaction.
Well, we're not talking about satisfaction as much as we're talking about pleasure. And so what we're doing is we're talking about having something on the outside that is going to come in and kind of give us comfort, come in and give us excitement, come in and give us hope, whatever it is. Okay? And that thing that comes in may or may not be sin or sinful.
That's right.
Okay? For example, somebody could go to a masseuse and get a massage and find pleasure from it, right? Okay? Is there anything wrong with that? Well, no, unless, of course, the masseuse is something that is sinful in and of itself, and then all of a sudden you're talking about something that is erotic and something that's wrong. You see what I'm saying is that when you're talking about pleasure in this regard, that pleasure itself is not necessarily sin, but the means by which it can come can be sinful, but the pleasure itself is just simply that excitement, right? Okay? So when we're talking about Solomon saying that he is testing life with pleasure, let's just not automatically jump off and say, oh, well, this is talking about unbridled sin. No, it's not. But at the same time, there is some of that that's associated with it. Okay? Now, what he does in the next couple verses, from verse 2 through verse number 9 right here, is different areas in which he is going to get pleasure from. Okay? And the first thing that he starts out with is just simply fleshly indulgence. So in verse number 2, he says this. He says, laughter, I said, is foolish. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was worthwhile for men to do under heaven during the few days of their life. And so Solomon says, first off, as far as testing life with pleasure, he just immediately jumps off into party time. Let's just find out what laughter does as far as pleasure. Okay? Now, as far as laughter goes, is it wrong to laugh? As long as you don't laugh at somebody, as long as, drunks Not all drunks are gonna be laughing.
No, laughing at them.
Oh, laughing at drunks?
He's talking about drinking to bring on that.
Yes, but I don't think that that's all what it is. I mean, that's part of what it is, but,
Sounds to me like he'd be a cokehead if he was alive today.
what?
Sounds to me like he'd be a cokehead if he was, or a
Well-
crackhead if he was alive today. He'd be
If
smoking crack or something, coke.
you go, I don't know about that, I wouldn't go that far. Does Ecclesiastes condone sin? No. Okay? Solomon isn't condoning sin in this verse. As a matter of fact, he's doing the opposite. He's saying that it's foolish. Okay? He's talking about how it is folly. You know? But he's looking back at his life, and he's looking at some of the things that he did, and he was looking at the objective that he was trying to meet. Now keep in mind, he's still using wisdom in this, and so he's looking at it objectively, thinking, okay, I did this in the past, what gain is going to be coming out from this? And it really doesn't accomplish anything. Okay? We go down to verses 4 through 6 and we see that there is accomplishments. In verse number 4 he says, I took great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. And so if you think about these accomplishments, he's thinking, okay, what's going to give me this pleasure? Can you get pleasure from setting out to do something and accomplishing it?
Well, he didn't do any of that. It was the people that he was driving that did.
Well, yes, I know as far as the physical labor, but, you know, that's actually one of the more pleasurable things about it. Not that you're forcing other people to do it, but to be able to sit back and plan it, you know, and fund it, and have everybody else do it, you know. That's where you don't have to get hot and sweaty and get splinters and, you know, smashed fingers, anything like that. You just say, hey, you know what, I'm going to draw out this plan, and I want this here, and I want that there, and oh, well, let's do this. And I'm sure that he had a lot of, you know, engineering in it, and saying, okay, let's get the water irrigating this, let's get these crops, you know, these trees, and then, you know, when the trees start to grow up and produce, then there's that sense of accomplishment of, you know, take your guest out in the garden and say, oh yeah, you know, I did this, and I planned for this irrigation take place, and let's go take a look at this house. And do you see the, I mean, do you get the idea about the pleasure that's there? Right? It's happiness that is derived from an external source. Okay? All right. Materialism, verse 7 and part of verse number 8. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself, the treasure of kings and providences. And so, you know, as far as Solomon's wealth goes, well, we've already talked about that. I mean, it's just obscene wealth, obscene materialism.
Yeah.
So he lists slaves, livestock, silver, gold, personal treasures, singers, and his harem. And again, you know, what we talked about the very first lesson is that a harem, wives were considered property. And so Solomon had almost over 900 wives and concubines. So yeah, he was rich. Rich. What's that? Porcupines? Okay, now you notice the last part of verse number 8. It says this. He says that I acquired men and women singers and a harem as well, the delights of the hearts of men. So this idea about delights is really just talking about comforts, okay? And so these men and women singers that, you know, were entertainers that he had acquired, so that's part of possessions, but it's the idea of the comforts that they provide. And so it's the cushy things of life, okay? It's like this, you know, you can go and you can put money and you can buy a big screen TV, or you can take off to New York and go to a show on Broad, whatever, New York show. It's not Broad Street, yeah, Broad Street. Broadway. You can tell I've never been.
You haven't missed a whole lot.
No, I'm serious, I've never been. But, you know, so the TV might be considered a material thing, but, you know, the the comfort of it, the finer things of life is what we're really talking about. You know, those little things that rich people will spend lots of money on, that other people won't spend lots of money on, because they have it, because it's the finer indulgence of life. Okay, so that's pleasure, right? Okay, and then the last category, fame. Verse number 9, it says this. He says, I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. Again, look at that, and you got to be Solomon, right? You can't be anybody else. I was greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all of this, my wisdom stayed with me. Meaning that the wisdom that God gave him, God did not take away the wisdom. Okay? All right. So, turning the page. What did Solomon find out? By the way, anybody have any questions about that before we move on? Okay. You understand what the test was, right? He's putting his life to the test. And you see that the test was, okay, what is pleasure going to do? And he's got a lot of different categories. Far more categories than I've got, far more categories than you've got. And the death category too. I mean, you know, as far as what he can do. Quite a bit more than any of us. So, what Solomon finds out in the next couple of verses. Verse number 10, it says, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired, or I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward for all my labor. Yet, when I surveyed all my hands had done, what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless. A chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Okay? And so, when he goes and he comes to the end of the experiment of all of these different things about what pleasure is going to do for him, what does he find? He finds this right here. Okay? 0 plus pleasure gained minus pleasure gained equals 0. Okay? So again, starting out with the day of your birth, okay? We're going to see how much gain do you have at the end of your life with pleasure. What is pleasure going to do for you in life under the sun? Okay? And so whatever the pleasure is, let's just say that, somebody has a moderate amount of pleasure, okay, 4A, and yes, this is a little bit of algebra. A is going to be equal to, I don't know, fleshly indulgence, okay? 4 times fleshly indulgence in their life, okay? But it goes away. It always subtracts. What are they left with? 0. Not even memory. So when you're dead, you don't even have memory. So if we increase this, a lot more fleshly indulgence, what do you come out with? Do you change the sun? Nope, you don't. What happens if we change it to, accomplishment, okay? So what are we going to say? We're going to say 400B minus 400B. It's still 0, okay? It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter how much it is, and it doesn't matter what this is. You're always going to wind up with this result. Period. It's just meaningless. It's a chasing after wind. Okay? All right. Coming down to our questions. Okay? Do you think that people today go after similar things that Solomon did in his day? Give examples of the following of Solomon's categories. First of all, fleshly indulgence. What are some things that people do today to get pleasure from fleshly indulgence?
Do drugs.
Okay, drugs. What else?
Committed adultery.
That's pretty fleshly indulgent.
Yeah.
What else? Boy, y'all live really sheltered lives. Now, we're not even talking about sin here. What are some fleshly indulgent things that aren't sin? Okay, we're going to put that in a different category, though, because we're talking about fleshly indulgence. We're talking about, okay, all right.
You know, lobster can be pretty tasty. Yes.
Okay. Fine dining. How about that? That sounds more overindulgent than just eating.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, I'm hungry, so I've got to get my stale piece of bread out of the, you know, the stark pantry next to the
Talking
one,
about shrimp scampi here.
next to my one bean that
Caviar.
hopefully Jack's not gonna go and bury and make a beanstalk.
Watching TV.
Ooh, that's one of mine. And I'll be honest, today, after, you know, driving 55 minutes to work, driving 45 minutes home from work, I came in, I was hungry, and I told Shannon, I said, to tell you the truth, all I really want to do is just eat, sit down on the couch and watch TV. I don't want to do anything.
When to eat and go to bed.
She said, we'll do that later. I said, you know, after I eat and get Bible study, I won't feel that way, and I don't, but, okay. Something else. Fleshly indulgence.
Exercise.
Exercise?
Some people find that, you know,
Okay, yeah.
Anything
Walking.
that you carry. I mean.
And how about this? How about
Now that's different.
sports?
Yeah,
Yeah.
anything.
That's a big one, Super Bowl coming up, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Accomplishment. What are some things that we do today to get pleasure from accomplishment?
work.
Okay, achieving at work?
Promotions, whatever. Work,
Okay, I'll just put that. Promotion?
accolades.
I'm going to say awards because I don't know how to spell accolades. To tell you the truth, I'm struggling with awards right now too. See, I'm never going to get an award for spelling. Workmanship. Something else, what?
Hey, I talked to a guy, he left teaching because of rewards. It's not like today. It might be 20 years maybe, but his papa's needing some help. He went back to farming. And I talked to him, he says, you know, he says, when I break that field, he said, I can look back at the end of the day and I know exactly what I did. I broke that field.
Okay.
You know, whether that's accomplishments, but for
Well, no,
him,
that
it
is
was.
accomplishment, yeah.
It was, you know, I mean,
It is.
that day's work, he was satisfied. Like teaching, he couldn't, you know, because it was just like headaches.
How about that? Pride in work?
Yes.
Pride in work?
Pay,
Okay. And what's that?
pay, money.
Money? Okay. Of course, that goes with
It
materialism.
does, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're gonna just drop down right there. But, you know, Carl, how about completed projects?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know? that for me is, you know, when I
Procrastination.
complete a project, I have that good feeling. And that's why I don't have a whole lot of good feeling, because I don't ever complete projects. Okay. Materialism, of course, we got money. What else?
Things.
Okay, like what kind of things? Okay, house.
Cars.
Ooh, this is flowing now. Cars, what?
Right.
Swimming pool.
Pools,
Clothing.
clothing,
Land.
ooh, shoes. I can't tell you, at middle school, kids are obsessed with shoes.
Yes, they are.
They go on websites and they find shoes and they take pictures of shoes.
Really?
And they come in and their iPads are full of memory. And I say, well, we got to delete pictures. And I start looking at their pictures and it's just shoes and shoes and shoes and shoes and shoes.
Boys too?
Yes. Oh, more than the girls.
More than the girls.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't get it.
We got a first grader that every time, I mean, his mother has a doctorate, so there's money. And this kid comes in, and when he comes up, first thing he says to me in the morning, Grandma, look at my new shoes. And I mean, he'll do that like 2 or 3 times a week.
A week?
A week.
Wow.
Okay.
But he's not learning a thing in school.
Yeah. Moving on, comforts.
Mostly
What comforts, what indulgences do you have?
making money just.
Well, we're gonna put that up here.
Making money just to save it.
We're gonna put that with materialism, but we're talking about the indulgences. We're talking about doing something that is overindulgent. We're talking about doing something extraordinary so that we can get the comfort from it.
42-room house.
Yeah.
Only need,
Okay, luxury.
I only need 3, but
Lots
How
of
about-
luxury.
How about we do this?
You ask somebody from Haiti, they say running water.
I don't think that's what I'm talking about.
Luxury auto, yeah.
Actually, what we have here, we do have comforts
Yes,
and
we do.
luxury compared to
Majority of the world.
probably.
We do, Central
Sixty
Air.
or 70%
Yeah.
of the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Of course, we don't even think about these things,
Air
but,
purifiers.
okay. I mean, you just think about,
Turning on the faucet.
Yeah,
If it
nowadays,
doesn't turn on, then you call someone.
Especially if
Easier.
pets.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just make life easier.
lawn, oh yeah, lawnmower.
Bigger lawn.
Actually, they
How
have,
about a remote control lawnmower?
no, they have
How about
robot ones
a
now.
robot lawnmower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm hoping up there where it says, Gerald, I got a bunch of money, I could pay a guy for mowing.
Fame, what about fame?
Oh, thanks.
What are ways that people do, not you guys, none of us are famous. Anybody here famous? If you are, I don't know.
Pretty famous.
That's a
I'm looking
self-indulgence.
at 5 or 6
because
people over
you
there
do
that
it for
really
you.
pretty famous.
What are some things that, how people are famous or what they do for fame?
Sports go on.
Okay.
Musicians,
Movie star.
entertainers.
Movie stars.
Yes.
Movie stars, oh my.
But the same thing is, on all of this stuff here, God gave them all those talents. And they don't even realize that, whatever they got, God gives to them.
You got
Politicians.
ministers too.
Oh,
TV
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Hey,
Sure.
you're right.
Deceptive ministers like Benny Hinn.
It doesn't even be that. It can be, just the preacher in the small town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Yeah.
you are absolutely right about that. You are so right about that. There's okay, I'll just leave it over.
Politics.
Politicians.
Oh, my man.
Uh-huh.
How can I make an emoji here that's a barfy face?
There we go.
There we go.
What What is it?
Of course, that kind of looks like a Fu Manchu here.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, looking at these, can there be any good things about these?
Yes,
Sure.
yes, of course, there can be.
Sure, you know. I mean, is it wrong to, go and have a nice meal occasionally, or, relax on TV, or watch sports, or, items to make life easier? There's, some of these things are fine, right? Are some of these things bad?
Yes,
Are any of these a mixture of both?
yes,
Well, even the stuff that's not bad, if you put it before God, it's bad.
Exactly.
that's right. You
Exactly.
cannot use all that money, okay? Instead of buying houses, cars, schools. or
Learn how to use it, to buy a car to go to church, or
Yeah.
help the needy, haul groceries or something, it's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean,
Learn how to use them,
you can think of, a truck as far as being a luxury item, but at the same time, you can look at it in terms of, well, why not have something have to help people. Mark, I remember one time he told me a story about how he was at Home Depot or Lowe's or something, and he noticed the guy had something he couldn't get in his car, and he was really struggling with it. And he thought, God bless me with this truck. Might as well use it for him, And, I like that story. I thought that was good.
That'd be a good way to reach out to.
Yeah.
Very practical. You know.
So, why do people spend so much time, effort, and money on doing these things? Are they seeking the same thing that Solomon was?
They could be, they could be.
I don't know if they had the wisdom though, so I don't think they are. They got their own agenda, I think.
Well, at the same time, if you think about this, the agenda is gain pleasure. But what they don't realize is that pleasure is not going to be ultimately gained. They can get the pleasure at the moment, but then it's gone.
Then they have to look for something else.
But then that's just it. It's just a repetitive process, right? It's, I've got this pleasure, so that was fun. Now, let me get something else. Oh, that was fun. Now let me get something else. Oh, that was fun.
I got $1 million, a strike or two.
Exactly. I've got this money. Boy, it's so great, but now I'm growing accustomed to it. I need more.
And I can't sleep tonight because I think somebody's gonna take it from me.
Yes, absolutely.
Big taxes.
So how lasting is the benefit gained from these?
Temporary.
Very temporary.
Some's going to last longer than others, right?
You're gonna last your lifetime.
What's that?
You're gonna last your lifetime.
Because, when it's all said and done,
That's right.
we got that. Okay? So is it worth the expense?
Are these questions for like people that have accepted Christ?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because, not under the sun, or not under the sun, S-O-N, but under the sun, our lifetime here.
And see, we can't, just because we're Christians, it doesn't mean that we're immune from this.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, we can be just as susceptible to this as anybody else.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's Christians out there that have a 42 house and a clean house.
Are there Christians that have that?
Or a big house.
Joel Osteen.
Well,
He's professing to be.
well, I know, but I can profess to be a chicken, but I'm not going to
I'm just saying, there are Christians out there that have that extra comfort or have that extra luxury or using the money they get to buy that extra beyond what they actually need.
I think that there's Christians that do have the,
Yeah.
can have the big houses and everything like that. I mean, you look at the Bible, there are rich people who were godly people. You look at the Bible, you see that there are poor people that were godly people. Rich and poor doesn't make any difference to somebody's spirituality. Yes, sir?
I don't agree with that.
Okay.
I think if you look at the foreign countries in the world today where people strive like they did back in Bible days just to eat,
Mhm.
I think they're tend to be a lot closer to God than somebody in New York City living out
Well, now, I agree with that.
$10,000 a month apartment.
What I'm saying is that you can't look and say, okay, that's a rich man, he's a sinner. That's a poor man, he's a saint. Or that's a poor man, he's a sinner. That's a rich man, he's a saint. Because when you look at the Bible, you see that it doesn't cut across any lines. But the rich, the wealthy, the powerful, the influential will be the people that will be more attuned to human wisdom. And the human wisdom is what's going to get people because they're not accepting godly wisdom. And with all of the stuff, like what you said, they've got their hope more in this world than looking out.
It all comes down to the camel and the needle.
It does, but I mean,
I don't want nothing.
I think having money and power also opens more doors for temptation.
Well, sure.
oh yeah, definitely. But at the same time, poverty can open up doors for temptation too.
Exactly.
Yeah. Doing drugs and dealing drugs, I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I was referring to the poor people in these countries. If you compare, like, I was thinking, I didn't say it right, but if you compare Christians at the lower end to Christians and the rich, wealthy people, I think there's a big difference. I think,
Yeah.
you know, the basic religion is more in the poor people in this country or any country more than the wealthy.
They have to live more by faith.
Yeah.
They
That's
have
right.
to live more by faith than the rich. The rich can have faith in their riches instead of them in God.
That's what
Where
happened.
the poor, you know, they're getting their meal one day at a time. They have to have faith that God will give it to them.
All right. Any last questions or comments on this lesson? Yes, sir?
Do you think Solomon, as he was going through life and going through all of these experiences, had in mind that he was going to summarize his life at the end through the writing of Ecclesiastes? In other words, did he have these things in mind? I'm going to find the meaning of life by amassing all the riches that I can, by having all the pleasures that I can.
I don't think that Solomon had it within his mind that he was going to sum it all up with the book of Ecclesiastes, but I do think that maybe Solomon, as he was kind of doing this, was using his wisdom to examine things. And I think that he was always trying to find that gain. And always trying to find that gain. And then he was coming up with zero. And it was frustrating to him.
So was he looking for that gain when he turned all those horrible, horrible foreign gods and idols?
I think that's a different subject matter. I don't think that there was gain in that. I think that his wives just led his heart astray. But the wives were what he was looking at for gain. But then later on, he probably stopped and looked at it and said, okay, well, the pleasure I got from these women, what's the problems that I got from them too?
You're not kidding.
And I'm serious. I'm not joking. I mean, his wives led him astray, and then prophet came to him and said, because you have sinned and you have not been faithful like David your father, then here's what the consequence is going to be for the rest of your life. And he faced those consequences for the rest of his life. Okay. 10 after. So next week we're going to take a look at Prove It Part 2. This is Part 1. Okay? Next week we're going to take a look at the next section of how he is examining life and proving his point of there's nothing gained after life under the sun. Now, remember, before you go and you're upset, you're depressed, and everything like that, you remember that life under the S-U-N is different than the S-O-N, okay? You know, we've got to always remind ourselves to put this in the context of the rest of the Bible. You know, the rest of the Bible, Paul said it in Philippians 1, I think it was verse 21, for me to live is Christ and to die is what?
Gain.
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 That's right.
Okay? there is a gain, but it's not under
After death.
this,
No,
it's with that right there.
That's right.
That's a tremendous gain.
amen.
Okay. All right, let's bow our heads. Dear Lord in heaven, thank you for everything you've given us. Thank you for your blessings. Lord, help us to use wisdom to look at our lives and to test them the Solomon did. And help us to use the things that we see to not live under the life under this sun, but under you. Help us to always submit to your will and help us to always put you first. Lord, please forgive us our sins. Help us to come back next week. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, thank you.